Well, everything we do at Rosie Lane Holsteins is cow-centric. Every decision we make is based on taking good care of that animal from day one. I'm Daphne Holterman, and I farm with my husband Lloyd and our young partner Tim Strobel here at Rosie Lane Holsteins, just south of Watertown, Wisconsin. Cheese in Wisconsin is king, of course, and so I believe it's 80 or 90% of the milk in our state goes to make cheese. On our farm, we have about 870 cows, and we grow corn and alfalfa on about 1,200 acres. And alfalfa is something that humans can't use in their stomachs because we're a single stomach, but cows happen to have 4 parts to their stomach. So it's rumination that allows them to use the alfalfa plant.
Putting all our crops together and feeding an entire herd of cows in the most efficient manner and trying to meet all the nutritional needs of the animals is always a challenge. It's like putting a puzzle together.
These are our milk tankers being filled with milk from the cows in the milking parlor. And this is really the hub of our farm. Well, in 1996, Lloyd and I spent 11 months building this setup here. It was a double 8 milking parlor. We since expanded it to a double 12. It's really an art to milking a cow properly.
The cow comes into the milking parlor, gets recorded, and all the data gets downloaded to this computer. The yellow line is her milking speed. And you can see that also has some variation to it depending on how nervous she is or how fast she lets her milk down. Before we had these computers, we had to handwrite these things, and you had to be very, very organized. It would take 1 or 2 full-time guys just to do the paperwork and the predicting in a herd like this. This is how long it took her to milk, 4.3 minutes, and here's the average. What that gives us the ability to do is to sort our cows by milking speed, because they're getting milk 12 on a side. They come in, we put 12 units on. They cannot leave the milking parlor until all 12 cows are done.
Lloyd and I both grew up on family farms, and I grew up on a beef and hog farm, and I met Lloyd at college, and we were married about 30 years ago, and that's when I started farming.
When I come out here, one of the things I pay a lot of attention to is how are the cows handled on a daily basis. Are they fed proper amounts of food in a timely fashion? Are they clean? These cows here in this dairy are housed in a freestall barn that are bedded with sand, and I want to make sure that sand is to the right level of depth so that it's comfortable for the cow and also clean.
When a cow gets sick, it's the humane thing to do. It's just like when people get sick, they need antibiotics to get better. We have a system in place to guarantee, nationally actually, that no antibiotics get in food. When each load of milk goes out of here and goes up the road on a semi-trailer, before that milk is unloaded, it's agitated and a sample is drawn out, and they test the milk. If the load of milk has any antibiotics in at all, the load of milk gets dumped. And right now, a load of milk is worth $11,000. So we don't want them to get sick in the first place. So prevention, vaccination, all those things are critically important.
Well, our daughter Lauren is majoring in food science at UW-Madison here in our state, and she's very in tune with caring for cows and showing people how we do that every day.
A common misconception of a lot of people is that there's nothing really in agriculture. You know, there's no future, there's no money, there's no place for young people. But growing up in the industry, I really have seen a different side of that, and that is that there's endless potential for anyone who's involved in agriculture, whether it be farming as my parents have done, or working, you know, in marketing or communications, some field, you know, extended from agriculture. Seeing what I can do with this industry and seeing what I can make of myself, where I can go with what I've already learned from all the things that I've done.
I think we all care about where our food comes from. And some people just have lost that connection a little bit, but anything we can do as a farm and as the next generation coming up to connect consumers to those animals, to the land, to see the people that produce that food, We're committed to doing that, to taking care of the animals, and the people that work with us here love taking care of animals. They love doing what it takes to get the job done every day. We've been masters at production, producing more for less. That's what farmers do very, very well.
Welcome to the first ever Food Dialogues. It's a critical conversation that this country has been eager to have for a long time. Today we'll hear from experts across the food spectrum, farmers and ranchers, chefs and restaurant professionals, academics and scientists, politicians and policymakers on the wide range of issues that influence how our food is grown and raised and how it ultimately ends up on your dinner table. We'll literally span the country, going from Washington to Indiana, from California to New York, and everywhere in between with live streaming video and social media tools. But as much as it's a day to share information, it's more important that we listen. The United States Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, today's hosts, established this forum so that their affiliates, which account for many of the farmers and ranchers in this country, could hear what we're saying, could understand the questions that consumers are asking about their practices, their values, their operations. In fact, the agenda and the questions we're going to ask were a direct result of two groundbreaking studies, really interesting. One focused on farmers and ranchers, the other on consumers. In just a minute, we'll look at some of the most compelling highlights from that research. One of the biggest insights is that farmers and ranchers are answering the wrong questions. They've been focused on providing safe, affordable, and abundant food, along the goal of U.S. agriculture, of course. But now the bar's been raised. The questions, as we all know, are more complex. The need for information about how food is raised, how food is grown has increased. The demand for transparency has grown. Before we get started, it's important to say, just to admit, we are not all going to agree with each other today. There will be constructive debate, opinions that make us all uncomfortable, and real challenges to our food system that will give us pause. But that's the point. This is a complicated topic with lots of solutions, lots of data and research. But we've never had an opportunity to ask the questions and start a discussion with so many voices. So I will ask that you remain respectful, even if you disagree with every fiber of your being. Please, let's keep the conversation constructive. One thing we learned from the research is that there's more that bonds us than divides us. And consumers do want to work together to keep improving how farmers and ranchers raise and grow food. The USFRA hopes this is the first step in a long conversation. A lot of people have already submitted questions on fooddialogues.com. Some of those questions will be guiding our discussion today, but already the USFRA has had a lot of people saying, why aren't you answering our questions now? Well, most of the tough questions in this industry don't have black and white, simple answers. And we do want the farmers and ranchers and others to answer the questions, share their opinions, and we think they're going to be doing that in the next few weeks and months. We want to facilitate the discussion, so please take part in the conversation. If you have information that's valuable, share it. All respectful questions submitted on our website, through Twitter, through Facebook, and in person at these meetings will be collected and posted at fooddialogues.com in the coming days. We do want to keep a record of what people are most passionate and curious about. And in the coming months, again, the USFRA will try to find answers to these questions and guide our activities with what seem to be the priorities from all of you. If you care about the food you eat, and we all do, stay with us throughout our program today. Engage with others who are taking part in this conversation at www.fooddialogues.com. Invite your friends to join. If you want to tweet on some of the interesting comments we're going to share today, use the hashtag FoodD. Follow along as others join this conversation. This is just the start of what I think will be one of the most important and informative discussions our nation has ever had on agriculture. And I want to get started by introducing our distinguished hosts from around the country. Let's start in the Midwest with veteran ag journalist Max Armstrong. Max, welcome.
Claire, thank you. Greetings from the heartland of America here as we join you not too far south of Chicago. We're just a little more than an hour south of the Chicago Loop out here, surrounded by farm fields of corn, soybeans, alfalfa, a few thousand dairy cows here at Fair Oaks Farm. It's a remarkable dairy enterprise here, not too far, as I said, south of the Chicago area. Just coming into the harvest. It's a busy time of the year. Nevertheless, we have some producers joining us here, people who have an up-close and personal relationship with agriculture. They produce the food that nourishes us. They're joining us here in the audience as well. But we'll be taking some questions and sharing with you from this location the voices and choices of farmers. Now let's go to the University of California, Davis. Here's Jane Wells.
You know, we're here at the Robert Mondavi Institute for Wine and Food Science. Agriculture is California's #1 industry. A lot of people don't realize California is the #1 farm state. They joke that it's the land of fruits and nuts. It's actually true. We're also on the leading edge of sustainability, organic, natural, what that all means. We're going to have a lot of discussion about how that, what that is, what hype is, what reality is, how it can be done economically, what the future of all that is here. We're going to talk to farmers and ranchers, leading educators, and a pioneer in the slow food movement who likes to hold the industry's feet to the fire, or in this case, cowboy boots, from what I've seen. We're going to talk about that more here, have some lively discussion, but let's go to the other coast right now in New York with Chef John Besh. Chef?
Welcome to New York City. And so I'm here today with a panel of experts that really delve in from the farms and ranches to the consumer, to the menus, to the checkout counters. We as consumers are so hungry for more information about food, how it's raised, where it comes from, genetics, the whole 9 yards. So we're going to jump into that conversation, and we're going to take it back to the farmer. And point of origin, what does that mean to our food supply today? Food safety, there's a whole realm of discussions here, really all geared towards the chefs and consumers out there. So let's throw it to Phil over there in D.C. and see what you got there.
Thanks, John. Here in D.C., in our nation's capital, we've brought together the current and former Secretary of Agriculture. We've brought together the heads of many trade associations, both in the room and on our panel. And we've brought together, most importantly, real farmers and ranchers. So we can really talk about the dialogue that is so important. Quite possibly the most important dialogue in our lifetime as it relates to food. And also consumers are involved, as Claire talked about, on Twitter, on Facebook, and certainly on our website. We're going to be having a host of questions that, again, as Claire said, might be tough to answer, but this forum is the place to start. Claire, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Phil, and we'll be coming back to you soon. Now, as I mentioned, consumers would guide this conversation today. I want to start that theme right now. The United States Farmers and Ranchers Association commissioned that nationwide study of farmers and ranchers, as well as consumers, to inform these food dialogues. Some of the headlines from that research we felt were really constructive in understanding the type of discussion that consumers want to take part in. Here are some of the highlights. Consumers think about how their food is raised and grown constantly, but they know very little about how food is brought to the dinner table. Overwhelmingly, farmers and ranchers share the same values as consumers. They care about the same things most of us care about: protecting the environment, humane animal care, minimizing inputs, and of course, providing for themselves and their families. Farmers and ranchers know that a divide exists between consumers and their food, and they don't believe the general public has an accurate perception of modern farming and ranching. And perhaps the most compelling result: consumers are firmly divided on the direction of modern agriculture. An equal number feel that food production is improving, as say it's getting worse, and 1 in 5 admits to having no idea. Clearly, we have a lot to talk about today. It's time to start our discussion, and what better place to start than Fair Oaks, Indiana? Let's turn the conversation over to Max Armstrong. Max, let's meet your panel.
All right, Claire. Thank you, Claire. We look forward to sharing with you all of the information over the next few minutes here from what I call the heart of America. Let's meet first of all our panelists, Dr. Malcolm DeKruiger. Malcolm is the Vice President of Bellstra Milling Company. Good to have you here with us, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Tell us about your role in the pork industry.
I've been in the pig business now about 21 years as an owner, and about another 15 years before that as an employee and as a farmer. And here in Indiana, we have a number of farms that produce about 300,000 pigs a year, and so we're in it pretty deep.
And many of these farms are within, what, about 100 miles of Chicago?
Yes, in fact, from where we sit today, they're all within about 10 miles of right here. So we're very much local here at Fair Oaks area.
Sitting next to you, another pork producer, also a corn grower, soybean producer, Phil Bradshaw from Griggsville, Illinois, right, Phil?
Yes, and we have a very typical family farm. My grandfather started it in the 1800s. My father and my uncles ran it. My two brothers and I was on that farm. Today, the day-to-day operations of that farm is run by my nephews and my son. My daughter also works in it. We produce about 4,000 acres of crops together collectively. We also produce about 150, 200,000 pigs a year. But the way we manage this is very much the same as the way my grandfather managed it. You designate people to workplaces. My son works with my nephew on the crops end of it. He works on my other nephew on the livestock, on the pork operation. And he splits his time back and forth helping manage those operations. And then my daughter is actually working in one of our offices, in the office we have. So we're all involved in the operation. My grandson will be coming into the operation after he graduates from college next spring. So we are very much a family farm, and I think, Max, we're very typical of farms in the United States
Certainly
today.
a family farm then, huh,
Yes.
Phil? Yeah. Gary Corbett, Chief Executive Officer of Fair Oaks Farms. First of all, Gary, thank you for allowing us to come into your place today to hang out for a while.
Absolutely. Let me first say that we're extremely proud to be one of the four hosts of an event that I think is going to be a very exciting opportunity to learn more about food and its genesis. We too are a large family dairy farm located in northwest Indiana. We milk approximately 32,000 cows, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. We produce roughly the equivalent of 5.28 million 8-ounce glasses of milk every day. And so that would be enough to supply every man, woman, and child in the city of Chicago and Indianapolis with an 8-ounce glass of milk, and we're very proud of that. In addition, we made a decision 7 or 8 years ago to open our farms up to the public, allow them to tour, allow them to come in and see a little bit about us and see what we're all about. And presently, we're hosting about 500,000 visitors a year. And we think this is another great opportunity to start interacting more with consumers and let them understand us as family farmers.
You bet. Thanks, Gary. We appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Representing academia, the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Iowa State University, Dr. Wendy Winterstein. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Max. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I serve as the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, where our crop are our students. So we have about 3,500 undergraduates, 700 graduate students, and we provide them with an education that allows us to place 98% of them at every graduation in a job or an advanced study. In addition, we conduct research on the critical issues across the disciplines of the sciences of agriculture, and we provide extension and outreach programs to producers, communities, business to share the knowledge that we've generated through our research programs.
Representing the FFA organization here with us, the state president of the FFA, Casey Conley from Knightstown, Indiana. Hi, Casey.
Hey, how are you today?
Just fine, thank you. Tell folks what FFA is all about if someone isn't familiar with it.
FFA is all about agriculture and leadership. We pride ourselves in being leaders of tomorrow, and I'm really excited to be here and talk to all of you today and be a part of this discussion.
It's a tremendous youth development organization by all means, preparing for careers in all walks of life, but many do go into agriculture.
That's exactly
because
right.
of the abundant opportunities that Wendy referred to.
That is exactly right.
To set the stage for our discussion today, let me share with you a couple of very interesting statistics. These are statistics I think that really kind of drive home the point that we're discussing here. They came from these surveys conducted during July and August. First of all, the survey of farmers indicated that 93% of farmers and ranchers, 93% of those producers altogether, indicated that consumers have an inaccurate perception of modern farming and ranching. 93% feel that way. Then on the other side of the ledger, the survey of consumers showed that just 2 in 5 Americans say they personally have enough information about how their food is grown and raised. Panelists, let's start by discussing why. Why do consumers have so little information? They feel they have so little information. Producers feel they have an inaccurate view. I might start with you, Wendy. Sure. Why do consumers have such a void of information?
Well, I think it really is based on the fact that we've had such a safe and productive food system, and it hasn't been a concern for people in the United States for many, many years. So it's time now, though, as folks raise questions about how we do produce animals and crops in our system, to be able to interact with them and help them understand what those systems are about. So I think it's the fact that it's just a separation of folks that have not grown up on a farm, have not had the opportunity to work with a farmer and know what they do in their day-to-day operation.
Gary, obviously, as you describe your operation, you perceive that need to communicate with the consumers. How do you see it?
You bet. Kind of the drivers behind why in the world did we decide to open up our farms. Historically, maybe farmers haven't been the most active in interacting with consumers. We kind of had a philosophy that the world ended at our farm gate, and we made a decision that we had to change that and become more proactive and offensive in terms of our interaction. Well, the statistics are somewhere between 1% and 2% of the population is involved in production agriculture anymore. Doing the quick math, that's 98 to 99% of people aren't involved in production agriculture. If you're of my vintage, you may have grown up on a farm, or you had a grandfather or an aunt or an uncle that is a child or a young adult. You had the opportunity to visit a farm. We're 3 or 4 generations, at least in our opinion, for that opportunity. And so we thought it was very important to start that dialogue and start that interaction, because it's not that the people, that these consumers are obviously not bad people. They simply haven't been exposed in this 21st century to 21st century agriculture, and that was our genesis or our driver.
One thing that strikes me with you producers here, you all have operations of significant size. I mean, they would be considered large operations. Yours is a family operation by all means, Phil, that you have there in west central Illinois, but I think many people would be surprised at the sophistication, the technology of your farm. There is kind of a perception, is there not, that big is bad, and why is that? Why do people think that big agriculture is necessarily bad?
I think, unfortunately, that they equate big with corporate farming or large business farming. The 3 of us that are producers up here, we are truly all family farmers. And we're just redefining what that definition of family farm is. But every family member is somehow involved in the day-to-day operations, and I'm not sure that the average consumer understands that.
Malcolm, with an operation of size, there come standards by all means. And to me, as a consumer, I like that. I like the fact that you have standards that you set, that you follow. Is that not the case?
Well, absolutely, it's the case. I think that whenever anybody has a meal, they have expectations about what that meal should be like. And those expectations are based on consistency. And so consistency comes from repeatability. And in our business, every single day our animals need to be taken care of the exact same way so that they can be producing exactly what everybody in the consumer world wants to have. And so those standards are very high. But even more important, they're sustainable and repeatable, and that's what makes our food in the United States and North America probably some of the finest in the world.
Phil Bradshaw, it strikes me that you're a guy who cares for his pigs. I mean, I know you from many, many years. I know how you care for the animals in your operation. That gets lost sometimes, does it not, on consumers, that there is a significant amount of humane care? I mean, I've had people say that we treat them like family.
Well, we do, and I go back a long time in the agriculture business and the raising of livestock. And one thing you learn early on, you have to take care of them. As Malcolm said, you have to have a consistency there. When you raised them outside, the way we used to raise them outside, it was difficult to take care of them. In the heat of the summer, you had to keep them cool. The cold of the winter, you had to keep them warm. And you had to keep them from predators. So it's a very difficult thing. So then we started to move them into buildings as we do today and raise them in buildings, environmentally controlled. We have our sick pen or hospital pen. There's a little difference. We have time. I'll tell you the difference between the sick pen and the hospital pen if you want us to. But we actually do this because it is better for the animal, makes the consistency that Malcolm says, and it produces the food we need.
Casey, and not everyone in FFA is preparing for a career in agriculture by all means, but where you live in that east central Indiana area around Knightstown, there are a lot of family farms, classified family farms. What does a family farming enterprise mean to you?
I think it means that each person that lives on a family farm knows the worth of a dollar. You know, they grow up in a community where it's close-knit and you know all about agriculture and know how important agriculture is. So that's definitely what it means to live on a family farm and to grow up and want to do what your parents do or what your grandparents do and to carry on that family tradition.
And there are a lot of folks, because of the opportunity today, coming back in agriculture, are there not?
Yes, there are. There are more and more every day. And I think ag education, we teach students a lot about the importance of agriculture and how we can't live without it and how important it is to get back to the farm.
The work ethic is alive and well on the farm, though, isn't it? I mean, there's so much hard work. And I think that's one thing that surfaced in this study of the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance is the producer wishes that other individuals realized how much hard work is involved. Wendy, I'm sure all across your state of Iowa, from the Mississippi to the Missouri River, you can cite family farms who they devote every hour of the day. And it's not just, of course, during harvest and planting, but they're in the tractor cab, right?
That's certainly true. And as we think about the farmers that we work with, they're not only engaged in their crop and livestock production systems, but they're also community leaders. They are engaged with leadership on commodity boards, they're on school boards, they're members of their church leadership. And I think that's what makes the rural fabric of Iowa and the Midwest such strong fabric and really positions us well for the future.
Yeah, you make an interesting point. They wear a lot of hats in those communities. So the volunteer firefighters, they are on all of the boards. They make significant financial contributions to their communities, do they not, Wendy?
Definitely, and certainly they make financial contributions to Iowa State University. And so as we think about our land grants and the partnership that we have either through funded research by commodity boards or by alumni, it really is a collaboration between farmers, businesses, and education and research to be able to, again, move agriculture forward.
Yeah, it strikes me we have some employers there who have significant workforces in their communities. I would imagine there are a lot of folks, Gary, in your community, a lot of folks around here, around Fair Oaks, who would say, we're so thankful that that operation supplies jobs. And as a ripple effect, could it not be said that from your farm here, probably maybe even 100 miles in every direction, there are people who derive their income, at least in part, by the fact that you're milking cows here?
Absolutely. We have 675 direct employees, and then the ripple effect, as you described, throughout the community, whether it's the guy that sells us tires or whether the guy that provides whatever in the way. I think another interesting aspect of that is our employees understand that there's 300 million potential consumers plus out in the United States that have an expectation of a safe, affordable food supply on a daily basis. And I think our people consider it a real privilege to be able to be a part of that food chain, to be able, we've been very fortunate in the United States that we don't have to deal with the issues of, obviously we do have some hunger, but where there's social unrest due to that hunger, where fabrics of whole cultures are torn apart because simply people are hungry. And so we consider it a real privilege to be a part of that food chain as a family farm, and all the employees that are involved in that. It's a big deal.
You alluded to this earlier by all means, but safety, food safety, is a significant concern among consumers, but you as a producer take it very seriously too. We saw the video a little bit earlier, the tanker truck pulling out of the dairy farm, knowing that that tanker is sampled for its content.
Certainly, it's frustrating for every dairyman across the United States to see in some of these blogs that now are part of our social media fabric and whatever, to say that milk is full of antibiotics. The simple fact is that every drop, literally, of milk that is processed into some food product in the United States has to be tested for antibiotic residue. It's the law. And if that is found to have an antibiotic residue, that milk is disposed of, again, according to regulation and the law. There are a terrific amount of safeguards built into our food system that are formalized, that we all have to follow. And it's great that they're there. We're all very comfortable with them. All of our farms are inspected on literally on a monthly basis to make sure our record keeping is up to date. So American consumers can take a lot of reassurance that we do provide a safe, affordable food.
Let me continue that strain there with our pork producers, starting with you, Phil. First of all, antibiotics. Why do you use them? Why are they necessary? Hormones, why do you utilize these in the pork industry? In the minds of the consumers, this is something that worries them.
Well, basically, we use no hormones. Basically, we use no hormones.
Now repeat that one more time.
No hormones. We use no hormones. But we do use antibiotics for treatment of animals, of our animals. I mentioned the sick pen and a hospital pen. We go. A sick pen is a pig that still looks healthy, but maybe we want to give it a little special treatment and put it in there. If the hospital pen is that pig maybe that got hurt or is getting near the point you might want to euthanize it in the correct manner. That's the way we divide those two. But as to the antibiotics and the hormone use, I might say we made that decision, and I think Malcolm will probably say too, we made the decision not to use those things on a routine basis because we read in the papers, the press, everybody, consumers are not comfortable with that. So we made the decision we're not going to do it. Now, I personally don't know that I agree with that decision. And I could tell you if we had time, elaborate a little bit on that. If you'd like for me to, we have time. But
we might come back to that in a little bit later question.
Yeah.
Malcolm, would you like to weigh in on that a little bit?
Well, Phil stated it very, very eloquently. You know, there are no hormones. End of conversation. You know, the speculation or conspiracy theory that there is something there is unfounded. So take it off the table. Proper care of animals, if they get sick, if they get a cold, if they get injured, they need to be cared for. And sometimes that care includes having an antibiotic to make them better. One thing about it is that if they are treated, we identify them and they are kept out of the food system for the proper amount of time until we know that they've been withdrawn, as long as the government says that they have to. Once again, like Gary says, it's the law. It's not a preference.
An antibiotic adds to your expense, does it not? I mean, it costs you, and one can imagine you're watching your bottom line. You don't want to spend any more than you have to, right?
Yeah, you know, medicine is money. You want to be very judicious and you want to be very careful with it. Our margins today are very narrow, and so any wastage is not going to help you at all. And so for our group, we watch everything, we monitor everything, and that includes that bottom line and how we use our antibiotics.
Well, I'm sorry, Phil.
I'm just going to add that a veterinarian oversees that use and the treatment at all times on our farms.
Good point. A professional veterinarian.
Professional
Gary?
veterinarian.
I believe all producers in today's times, there's a judicious use of medicine for the reasons elaborated, but still, we enjoy these animals. They are our way of life, and just as we would treat our children or ourselves, if it calls for, if we get sick and it requires antibiotics, we're still going to care for our cows that same way. They're our livelihood, they're our life. They've been, we're generations in that world, and so we are going to take care of those animals.
Wendy, as one who approaches this from academia, certainly you appreciate the science that we utilize in agriculture in so many ways. There is a reason we have these tools.
That's exactly right. And to build on your point, we use science and technology in every aspect of our lives ourselves, and we need to be able to have that same opportunity in agriculture. Science and technology is how we will go forward to provide the food that is necessary really to feed the world. It provides the basis for innovation that producers achieve almost every day. So science is what we have to believe in, and we know that science continually evolves. We know that the government works to make sure that that information is correct and that it is duplicative. So we're very much, that's what we do at the university, is science and technology.
United Nations Ag Committee in the recent past issued a report that said by 2050 we will have to produce 100% more food to feed the population of that time than we do today. They believe 70% of that food will come from efficiencies due to the use of technology. And so it's a part of our world.
Wendy, you referred to the fact that these technologies are extensively studied, and I can't help but think, going back to the mid-'80s, we had the development of the bovine growth hormone, BGH, which was utilized in the dairy industry. It was studied, I believe, for 10 years by the FDA before being approved.
Right, and the government does have very specific rules and regulations, but sometimes we run into a roadblock where simply consumers will decide not to accept a certain technology, and that is society's choice. At Iowa State, we developed the work with food irradiation, really the solution to addressing food safety issues, but that is a technology that does not seem to be accepted by society, so we have lost really a very important tool in the toolbox to ensure food safety.
I think we needed another name for it, didn't we?
That we needed another name.
Something else maybe, Wendy? But to the point that you make, Gary, there are milk producers who opt to utilize these tools, and there are those who choose not to. For example, in the area of milk production, right?
Absolutely. You mentioned probably the one that's received the most attention over time, and that's BST or RBGH, whatever you want to do. It was introduced back in the 90s. It was utilized by a number of dairy farmers early on. There was some outcry from consumers, but it really never gained momentum. And so dairy farmers, some dairy farmers did adopt it as a tool. And again, it was a tool in your arsenal to use as you ran your business. Then in the early 2000s, a new wave came that developed driven by consumers, against the use of BST. And I would say, and dairy farmers, all farmers listen to what consumers say as to what they want their product mix to be. And so today, the use of the BST has dropped dramatically. We no longer use it on any of our farms. And so.
It strikes me listening to this discussion, Casey, as we are talking about careers, that there aren't just jobs on the farm, but in science and all of the supporting industries. How do you feel about the opportunities out there for yourself, for other young people in this business of producing food and energy for the world?
Being 18 years old, I'm going to be in my 20s in about 2 years, which is a scary thought. But
it gets worse, kid.
I'm kind of worried.
As you get up in my years.
But just like they said, technologies have keep advancing, and what better people to put in that position but 20-year-olds, because our whole life is based around technology, and it's just going to keep advancing and advancing. So we need to put the next generation in charge of that. So there are a lot of opportunities open for people my age in agriculture and in agri-science and agribusiness.
Do you think it's appealing enough to a person your age? I mean, are there enough young people really embracing this? Do they get excited about it, or do they think, oh, this is farm stuff, and I could be a rocket jock or something at Purdue and study aeronautical engineering?
Well, that's kind of my job as an FFA state officer, is to go around the state and get people pumped up about agriculture and about the future of agriculture, because I certainly believe in it, and there's about half and other more members that do. So that's our job, and I think the opportunities in agriculture are amazing. They're so open. You can go so many different ways with agriculture, no matter if you want to go into the technologies and agri-science or agribusiness, or you want to go back to the farm with mom and pop. There are so many opportunities open, and really strive to encourage people to go to those opportunities.
That begs an interesting question for you, Dean. Are we getting the kinds of minds that we need, the young people who are embracing science? Are you saying, wait a minute, we need more of these people?
We certainly need more, but we're very pleased with the numbers we're getting right now. Next fall at Iowa State University in the College of Ag and Life Sciences, we will beat the all-time record of undergraduate students. We'll be over 3,623 undergraduate students, and we hadn't done that since 1977. So that means we're going to beat our record, and we're going to keep building that population. Just one quick story. I was visiting with a student the other day who's going to be graduating in microbiology. She told me she was so excited about the opportunities that she had in front of her. She couldn't decide if she wanted to go and work for the Centers for Disease Control. She couldn't decide if she would go work with a private company that had been visiting with her that focuses on food safety issues, or she was thinking about pursuing her PhD. And she just couldn't decide which opportunity she was going to take. And I think that's the kind of conversations most of our students right now in the sciences of agriculture are having. What particular choice will they make? It's not about which job are they left with, it's what potential opportunity they want to take advantage of.
That's an exciting time of life for them, isn't it?
The-
What a
the-
great era.
Pardon?
You're saying what a great era for agriculture.
What a great era. And we see it continuing on as we strive to really provide the technology that is needed so that we don't have hungry people in the United States or in the rest of the world.
Just coming back to you producers for a moment, in terms of the future in your operations, I know you've alluded a little bit, I know you did, Phil, to other family members involved. But Malcolm, where do you see your enterprise going, for example? Is there that next generation coming along that you hope to be involved in your business?
Well, absolutely. You know, my children have all worked in our business since they were about 13, 14 years old. And while my daughters have elected to get into things like speech pathology and nursing, my son is looking at coming back into the business here in the next number of years. And that's a very exciting thing. You know, we look forward to that. Our business is both family and employee owned. And so the employees' children are looking at it as well, and that's just a very exciting way to grow our business.
That is neat. Phil Bradshaw, as a kid growing up on the farm in Indiana, you know, my dad said, hey, you know, take a look at the world around you. You don't have to farm. He didn't discourage me, but I was looking toward an air-conditioned job someday in a radio station. You know, I wanted to be in from the heat. What do you say to the family members coming along after you?
Well, that's very potent with me, very prominent with me right now, because my grandson, who's 21, will graduate from Western Illinois University next spring, coming up spring, would like to come back to the farm. And in order to come back to the farm, it takes a sizable capital investment. And that means leveraging some of the resources that Grandpa has, leveraging them out for a long period of time. And that's a hard decision to make. And one of the reasons that I say it's hard, I think we as farmers, and I think the other gentleman here will agree, we've kind of figured out how to look at the markets, we've kind of figured out the weather patterns and all that. But right at this moment in time, we're having a very difficult time figuring out just what the consumer demands will be in the future, what their habits will be. Do you build a hog building that would bring up the income to the level we can bring in another? I want my grandson and my son and my children to have as good income, as good a lifestyle as their cousins that go to town. How do we do that? What's the consumer going to say? What's the regulations going to say? What's the future going to be for a hog building that we hope will be in production for 20 years or more? That's a decision we have to make relatively quickly. We have to make it now. And I'm telling you, the biggest problem I have is what consumers think we should do in the future and what regulations will be. That's the hard decision.
I'm struck by that significantly, because so many farmers, you know, worry about the markets and the weather, things they cannot control, but obviously you do respond to the consumer. Gary, I mean, this is an industry where you watch the consumer at all times. You want to know what he or she is thinking. Obviously, you know, we have this survey that gives us some insight, but you are responsive.
Absolutely. We're extremely bullish about the future and the opportunities that lie out there, and we think we're well positioned to take advantage of them or adapt to them. We understand that consumers will change over time as we look back through the decades. We're not concerned about that. We think we can adapt on the fly. Will it be a challenge? Sure. But that just makes it that much more fun and that much more entertaining and that much more challenging. But it keeps us on our toes and it keeps us at the top of our game, and we think that's a good thing. But we're extremely bullish about the future.
Malcolm DeKruiger, I see you nodding your head over here as well. You must be excited about
it. It is. It's to have been raised in this myself, and then to think about the young people coming in is just energizing. You know, at Bellster Milling, we are continuing to grow. We're continuing to look at new opportunities, and the young people that come in bring a fervor and a gleam in their eye. They're so excited about their opportunities, and you know, that we don't just bring in local kids to our operations. We bring in people from a lot of different areas as well, and so our nation is in great shape as far as I'm concerned. That youth and that technology that Casey talks about, there's huge opportunities, even to the point where I compare the technologies today in agriculture kind of like a computer 30 years ago versus a computer today. I mean, it seemed like big stuff 30 years ago. You wouldn't remember that, Casey. But, you know, there's no comparison. And even for those of us who've been at it for a number of years, it's just catapulting in terms of the opportunities with technology and excited youth.
Gary, I see you're
And
chomping
some of
at the
these,
bit.
you know, it's in our interactions with the consumers, it's just not necessarily about the food products, but some of our farming practices. And one of the issues, a dairy cow is an amazing animal. You give it 100 pounds of feed and 30 gallons of water, it'll give you 100 plus pounds of milk, but it'll also give you 100 plus pounds of manure. And manure is an issue in today's environment, and the threat of contamination to groundwater and the smells and all the things that go with it. But rather than look at that as an obstacle or something that is going to be a challenge of it, we took a different approach, and now we harvest 100% of our manure. We put it into anaerobic digesters. We create a biogas. Anything electrical that you see today, this show as it's being broadcast is all cow power. It's 100% we supply our own electricity off of that biogas. Now, we could have looked at that situation as a bad deal and had arguments about it and discussions, but rather we chose to go a different direction. The feedback from consumers is that they're very happy in the direction that we're going, and so it changed the whole dynamic and the whole tone.
Phil, go right ahead.
I might just add a little bit to that. Right quick, I'll say, I think the Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, what we're doing here today, helps me make decisions because I'm going to learn more about what consumers think. I hope we'll have a good dialogue. I hope the consumers will come forth, and those of you have different opinions maybe than what we might have. I hope you express those because that helps myself and I'm sure the other two make our decisions. So I don't want to imply I wasn't bullish on agriculture. And I would just add to Malcolm, with our hog manure, it's liquid manure, it's under the ground. We inject that into the ground 6 to 8 inches under the ground. All that manure is injected so it can be used next year for the crops.
It's a resource. It's a crop nutrient.
It's a crop nutrient for our corn crop.
It's often been said about you pork producers, you use everything but the squeal. And
That's
you
right.
really do. You
That's right. But let me just add just a little bit.
Of society and your enterprise.
We actually test the manure and test the soil. And then we decide how many gallons of manure we inject to that in the ground.
So there's no excess application?
There's no excess application. We have rules and regulations.
All right.
They're very strict. Yep.
Very good. We have some questions from the audience here. Let's go to our audience here at Fair Oaks and see if there's someone who wants to weigh in. Where are you? I see a microphone out there. Please stand and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Jenny Schweigert, and I have a blog, themagicfarmhouse.com, and I talk about our small farm and my in-laws' dairy farm. And I think one of the misconceptions are the difference between antibiotics and other pharmaceutical uses. And I think a lot of people mistake those antibiotics for being things like hormones and that. Can you explain how we need to tackle that misconception?
How we should tackle that misunderstanding of antibiotics?
Correct.
Versus hormones, you're saying?
Correct.
People tend to lump them in
yes.
one category.
Right.
Consumers may say, all right, these are chemicals that are being used in food production.
Right.
You know, I'm not a veterinarian. Actually, we have Dr. Gary Corbett, and maybe we ought to ask the doctor. But essentially, when you talk about an antibiotic, it's a product that is designed to kill a bug, whether primarily a bacteria, and the hormones are something very, very different. It's chemicals or naturally occurring products that stimulate a response, but the categories of hormones and antibiotics are very, very far apart in the biological fields.
I think events like we're doing today is going to be one of the greatest allies we have in dispelling those misconceptions because they're out there. They are. You can go to a lot of different blogs and see them, but it's going to take education, and it's going to take hearing from us producers talking to consumers to get that job done. And obviously, by our presence here, we believe in that and want to be a part of that educational process. But it's going to take that kind of effort. Writing about it or whatever is not going to get it done.
All right, let's go back to the audience. I think we have another question. Gentleman right there in the middle. Identify yourself, please, and give us your question.
Hi, my name is Michael Platt. I have a question for the farmers in the room. Most people's experience with animals involves raising 1 or 2 dogs, and they understand what the commitment goes into that. And then when they hear the numbers that you're throwing out, it's hard to comprehend. Can you share with us, what does it do? How do you raise hundreds of thousands of animals on a farm, and what does that mean?
A lot of work.
A lot of work. Yeah, a lot of work.
I mean, ourselves, as I said, we milk on this farm approximately 32,000 cows. We milk 3 times a day. So we're essentially milking 23 hours a day, 23 and a half hours a day, and some time left for cleanup. But it is a great deal of work. You have to be extremely organized. You have to be extremely committed. You have to believe in what you're doing, because you have to make that effort every day. With dairy, we're a 365, virtually 24-hour-a-day job on Fair Oaks. And so you have to bring a commitment and a dedication that this is what you want to do and this is what you want to be a part of your life. It's a lot of hard work, but it's extremely rewarding if you enjoy that, which we do. And we do, I say with all sincerity, consider it a privilege to be a part of the food chain and whatever we can do to provide safe and affordable food.
Very good, Gary. We have some questions coming in now through the website, fooddialogues.com. Let me read this one to you. The press, this came in from Truffle Media. It says, the press reports the carbon footprint of animal agriculture is high. What are farmers and ranchers doing to reduce the ag carbon footprint? Malcolm?
Yeah, you know, if you look at the carbon footprint of agriculture, there are different parts of it that are better than others. One of the things I think that from an animal livestock standpoint that really is something that we're working on is the sustainability. You know, in our farms, we will have pigs that will have their manure and urine and wash water that will be put into a cornfield to create a crop. That crop gets harvested, brought to the feed mill, turns into feed, comes right back to the farm. I mean, we have a very closed loop system to try and make sure that that is the definition of sustainability and minimizes the amount of spin-off, if you will, from a carbon footprint standpoint.
We have another question coming in from the website here to fooddialogues.com. This was submitted by Rick. He says, why is genetically modified, he puts that in quotes, why is genetically modified being pushed as the way to ensure a better food supply? How does the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance stand on GMO agriculture? Phil?
Well, I want to go back to the other question real quickly. We no-till all of our...
You can't do that.
Can't do that. Well, maybe we can't, but we're going to try. We no-till 90% of our soybeans. That is carbon sequestration at its best. We minimum till all of our corn. And then we'll go back to your second question there. Why do we use genetically modified plants and seeds? First of all, it has lowered the use of chemicals dramatically. At the top of my head, maybe somebody else can, but something like in the last 40 years that I've been farming, we've cut our use of chemicals in half. We've increased our production on my farm from 80 bushels to the acre to 3 years ago, 200. This year, unfortunately, probably going to be 150, 160 bushels the acre corn, 30 bushel beans to 60 bushel beans. So these are tools that we must use to feed the projections that Gary talked about a moment ago. I believe they're safe. 300 and some million of us have been eating genetically enhanced soybeans and products from them for now, 12 years? I think they're very safe. Our FDA and our USDA does a very good job of monitoring those things, but that's why we need it. We must increase the yields, and we also continuously lower the use of chemicals we add to the soil.
All right, Phil. Claire, I believe some folks have been communicating via social media, and maybe there's a question coming in from out there somewhere in America through that means.
So, as you've already seen, I mean, it's the debate and discussion is already well underway. We have one pointed question, I think, for one of the farmers, whoever you think, Max, will be the most blunt. What role do farm managers have for calling out bad actors in their farm communities? I know that's got to be a tough issue. That's from Willie on fooddialogues.com.
Well, it's a great question. There are bad actors in every industry. Realtors, teachers, car salesmen, broadcasters, heaven forbid. But what about in the industry of agriculture? Gary, let me come over to you for that.
Yeah, I think we all have a responsibility within our industries, and you touched on it. I think, unfortunately, sometimes ag gets pointed as the only industry that's undergoing or has its own bad actors. Unfortunately, every industry does. But we so believe in what we're doing that I think all of us as producers, if we identify or we recognize that somebody's way out of bounds in how they're treating their animals, how they're running their farm, whatever, have a responsibility to take an action, whatever that action might be, but we need to seek a solution to it.
We're going to head to New York right now. We understand there's an audience question in New York for us. So, John, you have somebody there who has a question for us out here at Fair Oaks, Indiana?
That's right, Max. What a great conversation. We're really enjoying the panel today. And I have to say, just for myself, I haven't heard some of these questions really posed to a farmer before. So it's really incredible to hear the feedback that we're getting. But yes, we have a Miss Tamara Davis here with a really great question for you.
Hi, I'm Tamara Davis, and I'm founder of FiveForKids.org, which teaches cooking, basic cooking, and nutrition to public schools. My question is, there's been a lot of talk about the antibiotics used in farming. I'm wondering if anybody's testing what is going into the food and testing that so I know what's going into my kids when they drink milk.
Can you restate the question?
I want to know if anybody or who's testing the dairy products or the meat products as to if there's any hormones or antibiotics that's going into the food supply. Is this the farmers are testing this, or is this government testing? I want to know what's going into my kids' bodies.
Okay.
Great question. So the question, I believe, is at the retail level, when that product is coming into the supermarket available for the consumer, has it been tested there? I mean, is there ongoing testing?
Absolutely.
Well,
In the pig business, at the packing plant, there are tests for antibiotics that are done on a daily basis. It's somewhat strategically random, but it is so there's no way for us to avoid it. We get reports from them on a regular basis that our animals were tested for such and such, and frankly, they're always negative. But yes, it's through the USDA and the Food Safety Inspection Service people.
With regards to dairy, a lot of large dairy farms will test at the farm site for antibiotic residue. But then every plant that receives milk to process into a dairy product is required by law, so they have to. It's the law. With regards to hormones, because a lot of these are proteins and whatever, and they're naturally occurring, many of these hormones that are used do not have tests for them. We simply can't test. BST is the prime example. They simply have not been tested because of the nature. They are naturally occurring, and so I'll use two big words here. The endogenous and the exogenous cannot be differentiated, and so...
Let me write that down. I got to come back to that later, Dr. Corbett. Let's go to California right now. Let's go to Jane Wells at UC Davis. We understand there's a question for Fair Oaks from there.
That is right. That is right, Max. Thank you. We do have a question for Malcolm from Christine. Christine, take it away.
Yes, hello, thank you so much. I was very interested about the use of manure to be injected into the earth and then fertilize the products, the corn products and others that are grown. My question is, has that manure been treated in any way for pathogen control? And my concern is contamination of water and potential contamination on food crops.
Actually, you know, manure has pathogens in it naturally, and so, but the way that our farms are designed and the way that our manure application plans are put together, they're monitored by the state environmental management agency. They know exactly where we're putting things, and we have very tight guidelines as to where we can put our manure, on what type of a crop, on what type of soil, whether there are tiles there. We have to know all of that information. And you know, the thing that we need to remember about manure applications is that humans have used manure from animals as a fertilizer for literally thousands of years. And so what we're doing today is more documented and sophisticated, but it's not anything new. This is an agricultural thing that has been around forever. And so we are just very careful about where we're putting our different products and making sure that we don't put too much on. It's all tied in with what the yields are and the soil types and the type of crop.
Well, Malcolm, Phil, Gary, Wendy, Casey, thank you so much for being a part of our panel today. We may come back to you. You never know. Don't go too far away. Let's go back to Claire now.
Thank you, Max. What an incredibly, getting some local applause too, what an incredibly specific and informative set of questions and answers. Really remarkable. Thanks for that view from the heartland. Now we want to get a view from on high, as it were, from here in Washington, D.C. with Phil Limper. But before I turn it over to Phil, I just want to tell our local audience here, feel free to write down questions. We want to hear from you. I think some of the most interesting questions have been coming from the audience. Phil, take it away with your panel.
Thank you, Claire.